Hey guys, let's talk about LED walls. Recently, I've been on the journey, which has really turned into a rabbit hole that I've gone down of investigating what will be the best product for us for an LED wall as we upgrade and remodel our worship center. Well, along the way, I ran into a company called Sound and Video Solutions, and Gus and his team really went above and beyond, just spending a lot of time with me on the phone, answering all of the little microscopic questions that I had. And so there will be a link in the description of this video for you to be able to get directly in touch with Sound and Video Solutions. So we're gonna spend some time now talking with Gus, really just asking him some questions that you guys have personally submitted, that I've already asked him. And hopefully you'll find this helpful if your church is in the middle of navigating an LED wall purchase. Gus, welcome to the channel.
Hey Rylan, thank you so much for having me here and giving me an opportunity to share with you, and I'll do my best to answer all the questions to the best of my abilities.
Awesome, man. Well, we've got a bunch of questions that a lot of people submitted, actually, just curious about different things when we're thinking about LED walls for our churches. And I think we should probably just start with the basics. Like, let's talk about the size for LED walls. What should we be considering when, like, how big should we be buying, all those different aspects?
Yes, that is the great first question. Very often when churches give us a call, they are looking for an LED screen, but they don't have a clear understanding on what's the size that they need. So I think thinking about the purpose that you need the screen for is the main aspect that you need to think about. If it's for the background of your stage, or if it's going to be a billboard, for the outdoor part of the church. But typically, and very often they need it for the background of their stage. So a good common practice is to measure your building, from left to right, and at least know, okay, what are your dimensions? What can we fit in there? And then we can consider what are the heights. And if you only know the width, from left to right, we can possibly determine based on the 16:9 aspect ratio, which is most commonly that's the ratio that you want to use for your screen, and we can determine that knowing, okay, what's our width, and we can help you determine what will be the right height for the screen. But that and knowing the distance from where the screen will be to where your viewers, but also keeping in mind that your first row can be maybe sometimes at 25 or 30 feet, but then your pastors, while preaching, they're going to be much closer to the screen, and that that also matters, and we'll touch base a little bit later. But those aspects could be the first starting point, knowing exactly what are the dimensions that you need, so we can start preparing something for you to with the right screen.
That makes sense. So just really looking at our room and considering viewing distances, similar to how you would be doing with a projection screen, but there's some different things that maybe we can talk about later, like viewing angles and stuff like that. But you did mention the 16:9 ratio, and that's something that, as I've begun shopping for LED walls, you see so many different setups, which is cool that you can configure these panels in different ways. But I've kind of settled on the 16:9 ratio, but like, why do you think that is maybe where most churches should land instead of doing like triple wides or weird ribbons or things like that?
Yeah, so many times when they tell us, hey, we have, let's say 10 feet of a back wall and 8 feet high, can we get a screen that is 10 by 8? And I say, well, yes, we can make it any size you want, but keep in mind that if you don't choose your screen with the 16:9 aspect ratio, any content that you put into the screen needs to be either shrinked, which most of the times we don't want, or it needs to be adapted so let's say that the size are chopped off the screen, or we need to leave a portion out of the screen so it looks good. So if you are playing, like most of the media that we use for churches are set in pretty much 16:9, so like a regular videos from all the media outlets out there. So if your screen is not 16:9, like your TV at home more or less, you're going to have to figure out a way to adapt the media to the screen. And normally that causes more stress into your media team because they have to work extra, and any other graphics needs to be either cropped or expanded or whatnot. So having a 16:9 aspect ratio will be very important. Now, that doesn't mean that you cannot have a square screen. Yes, you can. You just need to know what are your limitations and what's the amount of work that needs to be put in if you go that route.
Yeah, I think one thing I've realized is like we need to work backwards from what we want it to actually look like, yes, but how will we function and use it week in and week out? Who's designing content for the screen? Are we just, how are we going to make all that work together? So I think that's really important to consider as we're like shopping LED walls. What about like the idea of, can we add more panels in the future? Let's say we get just our main screen, but maybe we want to add more in the future. Can we do that easily?
Well, the short answer is yes, you can. However, I wouldn't recommend trusting that answer 100% because every manufacturer, when they make the screens, and this is pretty much for everybody, they make a certain amount of panels for, we call it a batch. So we make a batch of panels. And then whether you have 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, 100,000, eventually you're going to run out of that batch and you're going to need to order more. So even if it's the exact same panel, same model, same components, the batch, it's different, so it won't look quite the same. So if you're planning to expand your screen with the same amount of, with the same type of panels, you have to consider that in the future you may not have the exact same batch. So it's not recommended because it's going to look a little bit different. The color won't match 100%. Now, it's been said that there are some engineers that are very capable of matching with software. However, I haven't seen it myself personally done the right way. But maybe somebody can do it, but I would say try to think ahead what's the size of screen that you're going to need. And if anything, just buy some extra panels from the same batch, whether you need them right now or in the near future. So, we are about to move to a new sanctuary. So for now, we only need this amount of panels. But hey, in 3 or 4 months or 6 months, we are going to need a bigger screen. So maybe you can consider buying the same panel. So when you move, you have the exact same batch and it's going to look just fine.
Yeah, that's smart. Future-proofing that way. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, one thing that was confusing to me whenever I first started looking at LED panels was just like how the signal flow all works. I would go and do these church tech tours and I would see them using like media servers and Resolume, and then people using like GrandMA to send signal and like, can you kind of simplify how do we actually get signal to the walls?
Yeah, this is also a very common question, and it is simpler than it looks. The screens connect with a video processor, and that's how you send the signal. The video processor normally runs Cat6 cables, so you can have your screen on the stage, and you can have the video processor in the back of your media booth. And with Cat6 cables, depending on the size of the screen, you might need 1, 2, 3, or more. Now, for larger screens, we use fiber, but that's like a different animal. That's a very, very large and advanced type of setups. However, 99% of the times, it's Cat6. And then on the processor, you have SDI, HDMI, and DVI options for input. So straight out of your ProPresenter computer, you go into the HDMI and boom, it's going to display on the screen. So it's very simple at that point. You can use the SDI or any input really. Some processors have USB, so in case you want to have a slideshow on a portable situation or something. But that's typically how you connect to the screen. So there's nothing to worry, nothing that's going to take you out of your ordinary setup. You already probably have that on your projector, so it's going to be a matter of just plugging it, plug and play on the HDMI or SDI.
That makes a lot of sense. So like the video processor has all those inputs that our projector would have, and then that processor tells the LED panels how to display all the information.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Something that, as I've shopped for LED panels, that is always kind of put out there at the forefront and people are always talking about it, but it still can be mysterious, is this idea of pixel pitch. Can you talk to us a little bit about pixel pitch, what really does matter, what we should be considering? Is it the only thing that, like, is that the biggest thing we should be considering with LED panels? Talk to us about that a little bit.
Sure. Pixel pitch is the distance from the center of one pixel to the center of the next one. So the more pixels you have on the screen, the more resolution, and the closer the pixels are together, the higher the resolution, and also the closer that you can be to the screen without you noticing the pixels. Like on your computer, you don't notice the pixels because they are very, very close to each other. Now, if you look at a video wall and you get very close, you're going to start seeing the pixels. That's why we talk about pixel pitch and minimum viewing distance. Now, if you pass the minimum viewing distance, and typically from, I'm going to say from far away, 20, 30 feet and beyond, all the LED screens look the same, even the most expensive ones. It's really hard to tell the difference between a very expensive screen and not a, in a medium budget screen if you are, far away. Now, when you get closer to the screen, the one that has more pixels will look, sharper, especially if you are displaying, small text or things like that. Now, on a real environment, we shouldn't be, too concerned about that, because in churches we display mostly, graphics, videos in general. We don't display your email text or something like that. So pixel pitch matters, but it's not something that you need to be worried too much. Although I would say starting from 3.9 and going lower, so the higher the number, the lower the resolution. So the most expensive screens have a lower pixel pitch, kind of like, like 3.9, 2.9, 1.9, and so on. Passing 3.9, it's considered more like a larger pixel pitch, and I wouldn't recommend that for like an indoor environment. For outdoor, it's completely fine. Like even sometimes the billboards on the streets, those are like P10s or things like that. So and you don't notice because they are so far away. But that's why that's what's pixel pitch. Now, as far as if that's the only thing that matters, no, that's not. That's a very common mistake that we try to compare apples to apples and say, hey, this is a 2.9, that is a 2.9. They seem the same, but one is 3 times more expensive. Well, there's a couple of things that we need to keep into consideration. First of all, the construction of the panel itself varies. There are panels that are very high-end, very high quality, very robust. You can move them around many times and they're gonna last. There are some panels that are meant to be fixed on the wall, kind of like put them there and don't touch them ever again. They're kind of flimsy, We don't work with those, but those do exist. We try to keep what it's called like rental panels. They're more robust. They're typically a little bit heavier as well. So whether you're going to do a fixed installation or a portable installation, we try to work with the same type of panels. But that's what increases definitely the price on it. Then the lamp quality, like the actual LED lamps, there are some that are not as expensive. It could be the same pixel pitch, but some are going to look better than others because they are just higher quality. I always give the example like when you go to shop for a TV. There are 4K TVs that cost $200, and there are 4K TVs that cost $1,000, and some even more. Both are 4K, so compare your pixel pitch with the 4K example. And why one it's more expensive? Typically because it looks better. Having said that, there's also receiving cars that affect like the contrast ratio, the color quality, so you have better deeper blacks, more like vibrant colors in general. So anyways, there are a few factors that affect the quality of the screen, and when you are searching for one screen, it's good to know these things so you can keep in mind that not everything that you see about the pixel pitch is going to be the same. There's some other factors that will also impact your budget and the quality of the screen.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot to think through. And it can be overwhelming for some people. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop those in the comment section as we go through this video. and hopefully we can answer those as best we can. Gus has been really helpful getting to chat with him and answer some of this stuff. Earlier we mentioned things like the viewing angle, and is there something we should be considering with that and the contrast ratio and those details as on a basic sense? What should we be looking for?
Yes, so many churches have that question, like, okay, my church is super wide, right? Because they typically have buildings and they set it up on a rectangular fashion, and the stage in the center. So is the screen going to look good? So I can only speak for the screens that we have, and the viewing angle is about 140 degrees, which is very wide. Normally, you are not going to have somebody sitting at 140 degrees, but hey, if you have it, it'll still look good. That's something to keep in mind. And yes, the better the receiving cars and the contrast ratio on the screen, the more color depth you are going to have. So especially the blacks is something that sometimes the screens struggle with when you have dark colors on the screens. So if you have a higher quality screen, it'll definitely look good, and your contrast will be much deeper than in a screen that is, I'm going to say more like budget friendly.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Hey, you mentioned earlier when we were talking about pixel pitch about some outdoor LED walls have maybe a different pixel pitch. Just briefly talk to us about the difference between, I see advertised outdoor and indoor panels a lot of times on these websites. What are we looking at there?
Yes, so normally the outdoor screens are higher pixel pitch because you technically don't need it to be as sharp, because normally they're going to be further away from the audience. Indoor versus outdoor panels, the outdoor panels are typically a lot brighter, sometimes 2-3 times brighter, maybe more depending on the panel, because you have to compete with the sunlight, and then they also have to resist weather. So those panels are sealed in a way that the indoor panels are normally not. They are typically IP65 rated. And there are two types of outdoor panels. There are the panels that are considered for rentals, that you're going to be moving them around. Those are the panels that normally churches get for their events, retreats, outdoor, special occasions. But then the billboards, like the digital signage, those are even like a higher level of outdoor panels, because they are going to have to be exposed to weather 24/7 for years. So those panels should resist even more. And then there are some options for those panels that can be controlled over cloud, because at that point you get into another level. It's like if you have a billboard in the middle of the freeway, you can have your processor, somewhere there. So for that, there are some options, but just touching briefly on it. But outdoor panels tend to, be more robust and resist weather more than indoor panels. In general terms. But pixel pitch, you don't need like a super high pixel pitch for outdoor screens, because you're not going to be too close. Normally you're going to be at least 30-40 feet or more. So 3.9 should be really high resolution for an outdoor. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to, or that you are never going to see, outdoor panels that are higher pixel pitch, that are 2.8, but that's rare, and those are very, very expensive. We make from time to time those panels like 2.8 for outdoor, and they are very, very expensive panels.
Okay. So for the normal church that's doing an indoor screen, we don't need to get caught in the trap of thinking that maybe because the outdoor panels are brighter or whatever that we need those in our space. So just buy or, look at the panels that best suit your environment. Now, I want to dive into this topic of pricing a little bit, because this has been probably the most confusing thing for me. I've gotten, I think, 7 or 8 quotes from different companies, all for the same size screen, same pixel pitch, and they've run the gamut of, I'm talking like $100,000 difference in price. So how are people saving? Like, what's making up that difference in price for a similarly, based LED wall?
It's a great question, and I'll answer to the best of my abilities. I don't think I have the right answer for you on this one. However, I'll say what applies to our company. We touched briefly on the qualities of the panels, and that is a true fact. Now, there's also markups that you can add as the manufacturer of a product, and you can say, hey, I consider this to be the best, and I put this price on it, and that's fair. So if somebody believes on it and pays for it, that's fair. Now, on the other end, there are ways to cut corners on the quality of the components for the panel itself. You have to see them side by side to really know the difference. Like when you go buy a car, there is a reason why some brands are more expensive than others, and you go like, well, this one really drives nicer, or the whatever, the seats or the details, or so it is hard to know through the computer sometimes, and you really have to trust who you are talking to. That's why I think it's very important to know the company you're trying to do business with, to trust them, because at the end of the day, it's a business relationship, but it's going to be based on trust. So the panels itself can be more expensive. However, there is a point that might be like, well, I even think that sometimes companies charge way too much for panels, but hey, I'm not trying to say that that's not good or not. Everybody does what they think is best. But yes, as a consumer or from a consumer perspective, I think it's important to know that there are different qualities on the panels, and then which one fits your situation better. Well, doing the research and sometimes even flying. I have people that fly. We're in California, and for big screens, they fly all the way here to our showroom to take a look at the screens, to know the quality, and they can see it. Because when you're doing your research, I think it is important, if you're going to invest whatever amount, you put the number, whatever, it's a lot of money for you, okay? So I think you need to know, well, this is what I'm getting, and it's a good investment. Sometimes, a plane ticket plus a hotel night is not, it's not going to be overkill. And you do that, and you can get a sense of what you're getting, the qualities. And especially on our company, we have two type of panels. We have the budget panel, which we try not to go, lower than a certain quality. We don't want to be, at the very bottom, because that brings some problems. And we experienced this in the past with very entry-level panels. They start having issues, and then issues come back to us, and they slow us down. So we wanted to have an affordable panel, but still at a great quality. Even our panels that are affordable have A5S receiving cards, which you're gonna see them on the higher end panels as well. So that says something. Also, the panels we have, for example, the modules don't have any cables. Some less expensive panels, when you take the modules out, they have cables that you need to attach. That's just more things that can go wrong. And then we have a very high-end, what we consider a very high-end panel for people that are, looking for the highest quality of, lamps, highest quality of built-in, quality power supply, components, etc. A5S receiving card, or the A10s sometimes. And at least we have that option to offer to both environments. The highest level, like for example, what you are seeing now on my background, it is a 3.9, but it looks so good because it's a very high quality 3.9. So it's something to consider when you are doing your research, and put a budget. Something I forgot to mention when you're starting your research. Sorry, I hope I'm not sidetracking, but this is a very important, and I forgot to mention. Know your budget. Know how much you want to spend. And you can say, well, but I don't even know. Well, you don't even know how much it's going to cost, but you certainly know how much you can invest on it, whatever that is, right? And then that way we can work with that. Because if you say, hey, we have, for example, if you have $10,000, well, that's good. That's perfect. We can work within that budget. And we certainly know that we are not going to go to the $50,000 because it's just a waste of time. You are way too far. You might go 13, 15, but you're certainly not going to go 5 times over unless you did something wrong in the budget. So I hope that, that answers the question and provides a little bit of clarity.
Yeah, I like that you use the word investment when we're thinking about the LED walls, because that's something that really has resonated with me as I'm thinking, this is a large purchase, and I'm all about doing things on a budget. I'm all about DIYing things. But when it comes to the LED wall, I'm trying to figure out where is that law of diminishing returns, where if I spend this much, it's great, but to get to like the next level, I have to spend another $100,000, you know? And so, yeah, just thinking through it from your budget and looking at it as an investment. But is there a way, though, that we can afford this as smaller churches? You know, maybe we don't have $100K laying around to be able to put into a wall. Is there a way that we can still get that now for our churches?
Yes, as I mentioned, we have two different lines of panels, and one is the affordable one, and that one fits most of the churches. I had churches even with 50 members per service, and they got the screens. And we offer financing for those that are trying to grow with the screen, because the screen will definitely bring value to your congregation. I'm not saying it's the only aspect that you need to consider, but hey, the visuals are very important. I'm a sound person by nature, and I think sound is very, very important. However, you can invest $100,000 on your sound system and even more, and very few people will be able to say, hey, it does sound better, cool. But hey, you put a big screen in the back of your stage. Before you didn't have it, everybody will be like, whoa, that's amazing. Because we are, it's a visual thing. It's very impactful. So it will help a ton. It will help a ton to have a screen. You can, your imagination is the limit. And there are ways to do it like on a budget. But I always, suggest, go with a company that you trust, that they have a good product, that if something happened, because nothing is, nothing will be forever. Things can happen. Even brand new cars of the higher end things fail sometimes. Even more. We were chatting about that with a friend the other day. Sometimes the most expensive things, have even more problems sometimes because they're more delicate, but not necessarily on the panel side. But what I'm saying is, like, sometimes you're going to have problems. So who do you trust? What's that support? Because at the first part, everybody wants to get you in, but what's going to happen afterwards? Are they going to help me out if I cannot get it done, or I cannot install it? What's going to happen? If there's a problem, what do I do? Can I still call them back? Are they still going to be around? Next month? So I think those are just important aspects to keep in mind.
That's great, man. Hey, one of the things as I've seen LED walls in person that's been intimidating to me is when I look at the back of them, and it's like this spaceship of a thing, and I consider installing an LED wall. Can we do that ourselves? It looks very intimidating on the surface. Yes,
it is. I remember my very first time attempting an installation. It was a mess for me. It was but eventually, we learn. So the first time, yes, it can be very intimidating, and if you don't know what you're doing, you can make many mistakes. So we decided to put together a step-by-step video tutorial that tells you, the user, how to put it together, how to prepare for power, how to prepare for data. If you're gonna hang, how do you do it? If you're gonna wall mount, how do you do it? There's, depending on the panel, there's a couple different ways. Or if you have drywall, if you have the wood studs inside of the drywall, or if you have metal studs, there's concrete walls. So we put together a video guide that gives you, the user, the knowledge to, okay, this is how we need to do it, and to plan ahead of time. And I think it's has become a very valuable tool for our users when they buy the screens. And it also released from us a lot of the pressure, because when you receive the screen, you think, well, this might come with like a user manual, like any other device. Well, it does not. So you need to know that it doesn't come with a manual. So we kind of like created a video manual to help you to know how to do it. And then if you ever have any questions, you give us a call, right? But however, with that guide, you're gonna be able to accomplish. And it's not rocket science. I always say it's not like a brain, like open heart surgery kind of thing. But the first time, it's hard to do it all together if you never did it.
That makes sense. You talked earlier about things are going to have issues along the way. Hopefully we have these walls for many, many years and they serve us well. But what do we do when we encounter some of those issues, and what issues might we encounter, and how do we perform maintenance on these giant LED walls?
Great question. So maintenance, it's a very easy thing to do on these LED walls. We always think, well, if something goes wrong, my whole investment goes to trash, because it's, what is $10,000? It could be $100,000, whatever, right? Well, it's not really like that, because every panel has its own power supply. If you are talking about a higher end, more like a higher end screens, there are some screens that share receiving cards, so those are like in the lower end, so maybe something to keep in mind as well. Normally, with the ones that we have, at least, every panel has its own power supply, its own receiving card, and normally 4 LED modules. I said normally because there are some that have more, but normally 4 LED modules. So what can go wrong is one of those 3 things, or let's say the Ethernet cable jack thing. That's not a big deal. But let's say a power supply fails for some reason, it just decided to stop working. So what you do, you just take if it's a wall installation, you just take the 4 modules out and you replace the power supply. If it's a hanging installation, even easier, because you can go, from the front or from the back. So it's a very simple thing. If normally what's gonna fail, it's a pixel, like one little pixel or two, it's what's gonna fail. When you are further back, you don't even notice that there might be a pixel dead, but if you get very close, you're gonna find out there's a dead pixel. That's normal. That happens all the time, even on the higher end screens. Okay, that's normal. Now, what is not normal? It's a line of pixels that fail, or a module that has a different color, or let's say a square that is from a different tonality. That's not normal. That's when things are starting to fail. So what you do, you replace it. There are certain tools, like there's a suction tool you can use for a big screen. So if you need to replace a module in the center, and you replace that, you normally have some extra parts that whether you had them, you bought them from the beginning, or we included them, either or. I always recommend getting some extra, buy some extra from the same batch, as we were talking at the beginning. Like, if you're investing $10,000, it doesn't hurt to go a little bit over and get an extra panel just for this purpose. And when you replace it, you don't have a down like a down screen or like a downtime with your screen, and you can send it back for repair. They repair it normally. You send it back to us, we'll repair it and send it back to you once it's done. So if you had some parts, you're not gonna have an issue. Now, if you didn't buy any parts, or you run out of extra parts, well, you're gonna have to send it for repair eventually, and that's when you're gonna have a screen minus 1 panel or something like that.
Sure. Awesome, man. That's really good to hear and good to think through the service part of it. Now, something that's been a big consideration for me, because we're so into live streaming at our church, if you guys have been around my channel for very long, you know that is important to me. So the on-camera performance of an LED wall, I've seen really bad things happen on people's live streams as I've reviewed them, and some that look great. So what affects that video performance on camera with our LED walls?
That's another great question. It's very common. Everybody, even when they come here to the showroom, or when if you're at a church, if you pull up your phone and be like, oh, this screen is amazing. Like, if you come here to the showroom, you go like, whoa, this screen looks so good. And the first thing we want to know is pull up our phones and film. If you do that with an LED screen, you're gonna be disappointed, because the cameras the cameras can see more than what we can see. Our eyes are very forgiving when it comes to these details. So when you put a phone, it tries to focus on every single little pixel. It tries to get the contrast from the screen, and it's gonna cause what's called moire. So that's what happens with the LED screen. So there are 2 things we need to consider: moire and then the flicker, which are 2 different problems to solve. The moire, you just need to be off the screen with your focus. Do not focus on the screen. Have a subject, whether it's your pastor, a musician, a couple feet in front of the screen. Normally respect the minimum viewing distance. So if you are gonna have a higher pixel pitch, let's say a 2.6, something like that, well, you be 6-7 foot away or more. If you're gonna have a 3.9, a little bit more. Or if you're gonna have a 5 or whatever, just have to be further away. That's why at the beginning I was talking about that it's not only important the first row, but where the pastor will be, because the cameras are focusing on, let's say they're focusing on me, and I'm only 6 feet away from this screen in the back. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, and that will avoid the moire completely. The flicker, it's a different animal, and it's something that that's on the camera side. People think it's the screen. No, it's not the screen. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember in the past with the old TVs that we were filming. I remember my grandfather filming me as a child, and you would point at this TV, and the TV had this, these black lines going up. Something similar happens with the screens, but an easy workaround is to have your cameras at half of the frame rate. Let me rephrase that. So let's say the workaround is if your video processor is at 60 hertz, put your cameras at half of that number with your frame rate. So you're gonna be at 30 frames per second. Now, if you're one of those cinematographers that like to film everything in 24, fine. Put your video processor in 48 hertz. And that normally does the trick, and you are not gonna have those lines anymore. And that happens even with high-end cameras. We have to do the same thing over here in the showroom. So that's one workaround. The more professional way to do it is to use Genlog. Not every camera accepts Genlog, I think. But for that, you get a device that sends signal to the LED screens, to your cameras, and it syncs them all together, and that's the more professional way to do it.
Yeah, those are really good thoughts. One thing that I didn't realize at first is that LEDs on the LED wall are not just on. They're not on and then when you turn them off. And so this idea of refresh rate, it matters, right? So the LEDs are actually going on and on really fast. Yes. And I've seen some cheaper walls that are a refresh rate of 1920, but then what's the standard that we want to shoot for on our refresh rates?
Yes, definitely. So again, for our eyes, it doesn't matter if it's a 1920 hertz refresh rate, but the moment you start putting cameras in, it's when it will matter. So I would say if you are considering that you are looking for a screen that you're gonna be, whether in a church or you're gonna be shooting with the camera in front of it, you need to be at least at 3800 refresh rate or even more. Some of our panels are 7680 refresh rate. That helps you a lot when it comes to having a camera in front of the screen. So definitely do not buy something with super low refresh rate, because then it's gonna be impossible to really sync, and it's never gonna look good on camera, and you're gonna regret because it looks so good in person, but then everything, all your streamings, all your video recordings, and having a screen, a lot of the churches are doing now, not only for their services, but they're also doing, the normal during the week announcements, and you can be very creative having one of these in the background. So, but if you cannot sync it up, it's almost like a useless device during the week. So I always recommend, go a little bit further and get something that is gonna be good quality, and it's gonna allow you to do some other works, not just in person look, but also through a broadcast.
Okay, yeah, that's great, man. Okay, so let's say that we've gotten our LED wall purchased, it's arrived, and we're ready to set it up. Something we've been considering is how do we actually want to do this? There's 3 ways commonly that people do this. And can you talk to us about some of the things we need to think through for supporting these? Because they're pretty heavy, right? They're heavy walls.
Oh yeah, they can be very, very heavy, especially with good quality panels. They can be pretty heavy. So what you need to consider when you are buying is, how are you going to install it? Are you going to rig it? Are you going to hang it from your ceiling? Are you going to wall mount it? Are you going to put it on the, with the ground support? There are advantages and disadvantages to all of those. For example, if you want a fixed permanent installation, maybe wall mount is the way to go. But once you put them on the wall, it's really hard to take them down, so it's a lot of work. Also, wall mount, it's very time consuming, labor consuming. It's gonna require a lot from you. Now, if you're gonna hang, it's a lot easier. Now you just need to make sure that your building and your structure can support the weight. It's worth maybe calling an architect or and somebody that that has the right knowledge to determine, okay, yes, we can hang this screen and it's gonna be safe, because the last thing you want is that thing to fall and hurt somebody. So, and with the ground support is the same thing. You want to make sure, okay, are we safe with the ground support? Is it gonna fall or something? Do we have enough counterweights for it? But ground support can be great if you want to move it around. If you have maybe in 3 months have a retreat, and hey, let's take it to the retreat just to add value. Yeah, ground support is the way to go in that case, unless you have not so big of a screen, or a screen that is not so big that you can use crank stands with a truss system. But that's very bulky, so it's not really good for church, like permanent installations at churches. So I would recommend, hanging it from maybe a structure in your church, wall mount, or ground support if you're thinking, well, eventually we might need to move it, or if you are planning to redesign your stage in 6 months, maybe ground support is the way to go. So those are the options to keep in mind, and most of the screens can do either of them.
Awesome. Well, those are really good things to think through. We've talked about a bunch of stuff, all great questions, and I think there's probably more that we could dive into. Guys, if you have more questions, there's a couple things you can do. You can comment on this video and ask, or even better yet, we're going to put a link to be able to get in touch with Gus and his team in the description of this video. Well, Gus, thanks so much for hopping on here and taking the time to, educate us a little bit and just, figure out this all the ins and outs of LED wall stuff, because it is quite the journey that we're on trying to purchase our first one. So I really appreciate it. Guys, if this video has been helpful to you, make sure and hit that like button. And remember, we can do a lot of great things. Let's do it all for God's glory. We'll see you in the next one.